to the delingpod with me, James Delingpole, and I know I always say I'm excited about this week's special guest, but I think so are you. Before we meet him, let's have a word from our sponsor, Sina Crisps. I used to eat loads and loads of crisps in my normie days, and then of course I discovered that they're all cooked in toxic seed oils, and so I pretty much gave up. The people behind Sina have come up with a brilliant idea of cooking crisps not in seed oils but in coconut oil, so they're actually not harmful to you. And they also taste good. Was that a good idea to eat my crisps in the middle of the advert? I'm not sure. Anyway, I just want to make something absolutely clear. Just because I'm starting to do crisp adverts doesn't mean I'm about to become the new Gary Lineker. That's a joke that will go completely over the head of non-British viewers, and I envy those who don't know who Gary Lineker is. They're organic, they are not ultra-processed food, no seed oils, and you can find them at www.sinacrisps, that's S for sugar, I-N-A, crisps.com. Use the code JAMES for 15% off your order. So again, I'm not Gary Lineker, and I envy those of you who don't know who Gary Lineker is. I'm advertising crisps, but they are good crisps. They taste good, and they're cooked in coconut oil. So check out Sina Crisps. Use the code JAMES, James, that's me, for 15% off your order. Welcome back to the delingpod, Mike Yeadon. I wasn't exaggerating there. I think there's going to be lots and lots of people who are going to be watching this saying, yeah, Mike's back. Because apart from anything else, quite a few of my listeners, I think, credit you with saving their lives, in that it was thanks to you that they didn't take the death jab.
Mm-hmm.
When was it? All those years ago. When was our?
I think when I noticed things were wrong, I think it was probably February 2020, and famously, I think on the day of lockdown, my wife noticed, Joanne Bunny noticed, something had changed in me, and I was walking around the house muttering, "We are in so much trouble." I didn't know what was happening, but I knew you don't shut down the world economy over a cold. And yet I could see it happening. And so my brain was saying, oh my King God, we are in so much trouble. I knew it that day.
So before that, I mean, I think you and I, in our different ways, have been on the same journey, in that we were, to a degree, pillars or semi-pillars of the establishment. We believed in their paradigm.
Yes, I was a very good student. I learned all the nonsense. I could repeat the nonsense. Yeah. So if somebody was questioning vaccines, I would say, no, they're very well tested. I can assure you nothing would be available to the public that had not passed the greatest scrutiny, and my own children have been jabbed, and all that embarrassing nonsense. Whereas the truth was, I thought I was part of a noble profession where my job was to do in science what I did for a hobby, which is try and work out what had gone wrong with old things and try and fix them. That's what I fiddle with, old motorbikes. So I always say to people that science is very much the same. You've got some knowledge, something's gone wrong. Your job is to work out why it's not working, what you can do to make it better without breaking it. So that's what I tried to do for 30 years. What I didn't realize is that lots of drugs already on the market, if I'd looked at them closely, I would have realized they didn't pass muster. But I never looked at any of them. I worked in asthma and chronic bronchitis, allergic rhinitis. Most of those drugs are, I would say, fairly weak, but they're not dangerous. They're not dangerous because they're mostly low-dose inhaled drugs. And the main problem is they don't work that well. So I didn't, even looking back on it, the field I was in wasn't in the business of harming people. Of course, the irony I later learned was the reason we have so many people with asthma is because of the bloody jabs. It's awful. So everything has come together to realize years down the road that there are substances in the vaccines that render a person's biology apt to attack itself. And one of the consequences of that is you end up with the what I would have called as a normie chronic autoimmune diseases, which is why lots of people have got atopy, allergy, eczema, asthma, things like that. People used to ask me every few years, Mike, why do you think the incidence of all these diseases has risen strikingly during your career, which is late 80s to relatively recently? And I always said, I don't know. One of the theories was what's called the hygiene hypothesis, that as we've left the land and occupied cities and become obsessed with cleanliness, our children are no longer exposed to helpful soil organisms. They don't pat animals anymore. They don't feed the chickens. And as a result, their bodies are primed to inappropriately attack all sorts of non-noxious substances. And for some people, that is overdone and leads to these chronic illnesses. That's still not a bad hypothesis. It's just wrong. What happens is that childhood vaccines have tiny amounts of what I would have thought of were incidental or accidental proteins like chicken egg albumin or beef whey protein extract, and it'll be like 0.01%, something tiny. Sasha Latypova has done the best work on this, and she's systematically combed all the childhood vaccines. And most of them, if you add them all up together, there is a protein component from every one of the main healthy food groups in children's vaccines. Oh, yes. So by the time you've had 2 jabs of almost everything you are allergic, your child has a good chance of becoming allergic to one or more of eggs, meat, fish, things like that. And so you end up with massive amounts of food allergy. And they're not just picky kids. Some are picky kids. Some have genuinely been primed to not be able to digest and consume healthy food, which is, as you and I would probably think, James, quite diabolical. It's
I was going to say,
diabolical.
Doesn't part of you admire the diabolical genius of these people? Because if they want to kill us, we understand that. They want to kill us and enslave us. And so you put yourself in the position of the cabal, say 200 years ago, and you're having your committee meeting in your darkened room, and you're thinking, well, there's all these people and they're breeding at such a rate. I mean, it's going to be harder and harder to kill them all. How are we going to do it? How are we going to poison them and then some bright spark thinks, I know, we're going to make them take these injections, which make all the things that are good for them toxic, all the food groups that they need.
Unbelievable. And I think someone with my educational background came up with an idea as diabolical as that, which is maybe the mission was, basically, you guys, you're clever. You'll figure it out. I want by next year's meeting or whatever it is, the scientific subcommittee of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. I want you guys to come back with a brainstorm of 100 separate methods for poisoning or making people ill, each of which has an ostensible story, so we can explain why we're doing it.
Yes.
The real story, the committee needs to know if it's nasty enough so we can include it. And all of them have got to, each on their own, have got to be not so obvious that even if we were rumbled, they'd nail us. So, and then we're going to we'll pick the worst 100 of them and we'll just start rolling them out. Pesticides, insecticides, vaccines, and then we'll distort their education. We'll screw them up through everything to do with culture, music, stories, books. And they've done exactly that. They've brainstormed 100 ways to make your life. And
these people.
I've said to Bunny several times that obviously I hate what they're doing, but I have to sometimes I stand back and go, how did you? We've probably only rumbled a small fraction of what they've done to us. None of this stuff can possibly be accidental, because I've seen the bits I've seen, James, right?
Yeah,
You will have seen other bits from the music industry and so on. But when I've rumbled the bits I've seen, I know in the heartbeat that this isn't an accident. Because if I'd been involved in vaccine development, I would say, wait, somebody won a Nobel Prize in 1904 for the observation that if you give an animal a tiny injection of a foreign protein, and then you come back 2 weeks later and give them another tiny dose of a foreign protein, thereafter, from about 2 weeks after, they are now permanently, violently allergic to that foreign protein. So, guys, don't put any foreign proteins in these damn injections. None, like zero. But obviously, I wasn't involved. I'd never looked. I wasn't in vaccinology. And here's just another thing, just to show how clever they were. At least as in the big drug companies, the departments of vaccinology and the departments I worked in, so-called discovery biology, were always geographically separated, so I never met them. Never. I worked at Wellcome, then Glaxo Wellcome. Their vaccine group was on the other side of the Atlantic. Same with Pfizer, somewhere in America. I never met a vaccinologist in 35 years, except at the annual sort of show and tell meeting where everybody would get together under high pressure and give a presentation for their therapy area. So I would sing for my supper and do an hour-long pitch on allergic and respiratory diseases. And then I'd be, great, my job's done. I would hardly pay attention to anybody else's. But I do remember there was a guy whose name I can't remember who ran the vaccines department, and he was quite a dark figure. But we were told his department was making like more money than anybody else's, so we should show due deference to these people. So I never had a conversation with a vaccinologist in research in any of the companies I worked in. And I wonder whether they made sure that we never met, because I might ask them questions and accidentally say, what did you just say? What's in the vial again? Yeah. But so it's worth me just mentioning, I'm not going to go off on one too long. But so if I take myself back 7 years, I believe that many human diseases, I'll just repeat the story and try not to laugh. Many human diseases are caused by submicroscopic infectious particles called viruses that float around. And then they land in me or someone, a healthy person, just this tiny particle, and it takes over my body, multiplies, and makes me ill. I mean, it's nonsense, isn't it? The reason you know it's nonsense is there are also microscopic organisms like bacteria. And if you wipe your cutting board on your kitchen or a spoon from your drawer, you could probably grow a culture off it. It's not sterile, but it's clean. So, but if you lick that spoon that's not been sterilized, you wouldn't expect to go down with, some nasty disease because you're a healthy person. So if you're healthy, we've just demonstrated that you can eat raw foods, you can cook meats without sterilizing them, and you don't get ill. And that's because your body is incredibly well equipped to defend itself against the things it will encounter. Your skin is not permeable to water. So you can swim even in dilute, unpleasant chemicals. And as long as you don't swallow too much, you'll be fine. If you eat food that's got a little contamination on it, the first thing it lands into is a pot of acid, your stomach. Try surviving that. I mean, and then it comes out into your duodenum and is chewed up by all sorts of digestive enzymes and like the equivalent of fairy liquid, like your bile salts. Try surviving that, and then if your body doesn't want it, it doesn't absorb it, and a day later it comes out of your bottom. So we are very well equipped to defend ourselves, but I believe that submicroscopic floating infectious particles called viruses could land on me and that, I don't know, like jiu-jitsu throw and make me sick. But so there's that nonsense. That's not true, by the way. I've looked very closely, and I'm now confident there is no scientific evidence for the existence of any virus. They are an invention. And when people go, oh no, we've cultured them and we can see cells dying and we've got their DNA sequences or whatever. When you look at each one of the sort of half dozen pillars of evidence for viruses, you don't find weak evidence. So this is the important thing. You don't find weak evidence. What you find, folks, is fraud. So in terms of so-called infecting cells with viruses and then seeing if the cells then die, that's what they would typically do. The fraud you find is they don't do the uninfected controls to see, do cells die anyway if you don't do anything to them? Because that's what happens. They die anyway. What they do is modify the conditions without, like, off stage. They culture the cells, modify the conditions, bring them in front of you like a conjurer, add the so-called suspected virus particle, like a sample from a person, and then they continue to culture them in front of them and go, look, they're dying. Look, they're dying off over the next few days. But what they did just before they brought them on the stage was modify the growth conditions, so they're going to die. You've starved them and poisoned them. They do. They reduce the growth medium and they add antibiotics. And they never do the uninfected controls. When you look through every scientific paper on the so-called isolation of viruses, how was an isolation involves adding them to culture? You're a wordsmith, James. You would appreciate that the word isolation would not be attached to the procedure I've just described, but that is the procedure that's preceded by the title, The Isolation of SARS-CoV-2. But it's fraud, folks. So it's not a difference of opinion here. It's not just Mike's hunch. The basic scientific method would require you to compare condition A with a control condition, so you can look at to see what the thing you've done, what's the effect of the thing you've done. If you do nothing, you need to look at the background. They never do that experiment. And I remember when I was told this, I think it was Tom Cowan or Andrew Kaufman. Anyway, I had a chat a long time ago, and I said, if what you've told me is true, this whole thing is fraud. And he said, it is. And I said, I'm not going to commit on this call to your position or my position, but I will tell you this, I will look. And if what you say is true, I'll sing out. Anyway, it took me a while. So that's the first part, that aren't viruses. Illnesses are real. So something like flu it's a collection of illnesses where you've got, you feel awful, you may have stiff joints, you could be coughing, could be short of breath. It's not a single defined illness, but it's like a constellation of signs and symptoms that we call flu. But they're not caused by viruses. And none of the other illnesses that we are told are caused by viruses are caused by viruses. Sometimes we've got a good idea what causes them, and often we don't. We don't really know how many diseases happen, but I can tell you they're not caused by viruses because there aren't any. That fraud there are two frauds that lead to the third fraud, which is vaccines. The second fraud, and they've frightened everybody, is the idea that the illnesses that they've attributed wrongly, fraudulently to viruses are contagious, so that you are at risk from those people. Stay away. But in the case of like colds and flu, people really struggle with this because they think, I definitely caught it from my brother-in-law when they came over at Christmas, or one of my kids came home with it and then I got it. So, but what is actually happening is that your bodies, you've got the state of your body and its nutrition and its psychological health and your good habits and bad habits. You are prone every now and again to having, as it were, a mini breakdown, and you have to recover that, whatever that system is. And part of that will be what you eat, where you live, the air you breathe, the water you drink, the kind of conversations you have with people, which might be stressful or relaxing, and so on. And so if someone in your household or friendship group or work group becomes unwell as a combination of these vulnerabilities, you are also sharing some of that environment. So you'll notice in families often one other person will get sick. So someone's got a cold and then someone else gets a stinking cold. But what you don't find is they all get it. You just don't find that. people think that's what happens, but I promise you, next time, when someone in your house gets ill, watch and see what happens. Do you get ill every time? Or are you just remembering the occasion where you did get ill? So the contagion story, it's a very clever story because it matches quite well people's observations. They think, yeah, that figures because I saw a guy coughing at the bus stop when I was walking past. So when you go down with a cold, the most natural thing in the world is to think, where did I catch this from? And because these illnesses, colds and flu, are quite common, you can nearly always find someone. Yeah, it was the lady at the checkout. She shouldn't have been at work. Or it was the guy in the next office. I passed him in the corridor, or I shook hands with the visitor and then he sneezed, But how many times do you have such encounters and you don't get ill? And of course, you don't even think about that. But basically, there is nothing in it except your belief that there's something in it. It's just your body going through a breakdown and a recovery. Well, I think it's due to, for example, that colds are much more common, aren't they, in the Northern Hemisphere winter?
Yeah.
Why is that? What, the viruses only come out to play in December? It's mad, isn't it? You can get a summer cold, but there are many more coughs, colds and sneezes in the winter, Northern Hemisphere. I think it's as simple as this. We probably all know the example that the surface area for gas exchange of our lungs is supposed to be about the size of a tennis court. It's a huge surface area. We've got all these little alveoli, little bubbles getting smaller and smaller and smaller into our lungs. That provides gas exchange. So I can extract the oxygen from the air in a moment and breathe out the CO2. So I must have a big surface area to do it. So that is a true statement. You've got a big surface area. But you don't breathe air oxygen directly. It dissolves into a very thin liquid layer on the inside of your lungs called the airway surface liquid. So hold on, Mike, are you saying you've got a tennis court worth of area in your lungs and it's got like a really thin layer of liquid that's got some mucus in it, which are gel-like proteins, and a little bit of salts, sodium chloride and potassium and so on. And then there are little cilia, little tiny waving fingers, and they all waft from your diaphragm up towards your throat so that you can swallow anything. So your lungs are self-cleaning. They through the ciliated action of these cells lining your airway, it removes anything like dust and bacteria and bits of grit and so on, and wafts them into the throat, and you swallow or spit them out. And so I think what causes colds is this. In the winter, you go into a warm, centrally heated house, then you dash out to the car, and it's very cold. If it was a frosty night, it might be also very dry and desiccating, and you forget to drink, and then you rush in and have a hot tea. And I think some people at some point lose some control over the hydration of the airway surface liquid. And I think that's what causes that unpleasant feeling in your chest. And I hope it doesn't develop into a cold. And you wake up sometimes and you're fine. And other days, oh my God, I'm getting worse. So I think that's just a cycle of like loss of control, symptoms, recovery. And I think that's what a cold is. So for myself, I'm confident that contagion is a lie. So I've just explained what I think doesn't happen with flu and colds. But I can tell you, I've read every single paper where people have attempted to cause someone with a cold to give it to a healthy person, like in the common cold unit that used to run in Salisbury. And I think there are several dozen published papers from 1918 to the last time I looked was 2024. And every one of those papers concludes transmission must occur differently than we understand, because on no occasion were we able to infect a healthy person with someone who had a cold. So it never actually occurs. People's observations are often consistent with contagion for reasons I've just explained, but when you examine them, contagion does not happen. So if you choose to believe me, if your mission is to decide for yourself, we haven't got the submicroscopic infectious particles called viruses, that's bullshit. We don't have contagion of a sick person to a well person, that's bullshit as well. But you need both of those lies, don't you, in order that vaccines make any sense. But they're both false, and if any one of them is false, you're being lied to. They're both false, You're being lied to. Why is it diabolical magic? Why is this so important? Two things to tell you. One is why it's so important. And I reeled over with horror when I sussed it, and I hope you will too. And then I'm going to remind you something very peculiar happens with people who don't go along with this nonsense. And it happens nowhere else in your professional existence, which I think ties in with what I'm about to tell you. So it's the only thing you routinely do now where you get a hollow metal needle and you jab it into a human being, and then you close the plunger on the syringe, and whatever is in that syringe ends up inside your body. It's got through all your defenses in one go. I remember I told you your skin is really brilliant. You know, your skin is an incredible, it's like 3 different layers, stratified outside layer, then you've got the dermis, then the epidermis, and so on, and then small blood vessels underneath that will weep if you cut yourself and throw defenses to keep you clean from the outside, invasions from the outside world. Your skin's brilliant. It's a huge organ. And then your lungs have got this lining of sticky stuff that wafts out, keeps you safe. And then your stomach, as I say, it sterilizes whatever you eat. Your God and nature have given you an incredibly well-defended fortress, and you occupy that space for your life. But if you can jab a hollow needle, you go bypass your digestive system, you bypass your breathing, you bypass your skin's mighty defenses, and you can inject whatever the hell you like into a human being. So that's why they chose the injection. And I think you need this diabolical lie of stupid, invented viruses, and understandable, but not through contagion. A friend of mine pointed out that in 6,000 years of writing of every culture on the planet, you will find no mention of contagion, no mention of contagion. Interestingly, funny, you would think they would have noticed that long before whatever.
So when did contagion appear in the narrative? When did people start talking about this?
I'm not sure, but I think it probably was going to be like 1700 to 1800. I think the people that started scarifying, which was to cut repeatedly the skin and then shove cowpox pus into people, that Jenner experiments, that it's another lie. The heroic theories, the heroic figures of science and medicine, I'm afraid they're mostly made up, just like the heroic figures of literature are probably mostly. But I just want to tell you one. So that's the lie: viruses, contagion, and vaccines. And I write it down as a mathematical equation. Virus lie plus contagion lie equals vaccine lie. And I'm very confident. I don't care if people call me an anti-vaxxer or a conspiracy theorist. I remind them there is a conspiracy. There's nothing theoretical about it. So, and I've explained how diabolical injecting people is. Please don't allow yourself to be injected. The one exception, I've got terrible NHS teeth, as you can see. So I've often been injected with local anesthetics, and they've made the difference between a torturous visit to the dentist and one that's tolerable while I lose another tooth. But unless you're in that position, please don't allow yourself to be injected with anything. Don't let people do it. I really don't think it's a good idea. And certainly parents, don't allow your children or babies, innocent, beautiful, perfect creatures, to be injected. I'm pleased to say our older daughter, we brought forth her 3rd child, a little girl, just before Christmas. She was born at home, didn't get a vitamin K injection. She's seen a couple of doctors for various things, and the doctor asked, well, has she had her jabs? And Becca said, she's not going to be having any. And she said, that's fine. She didn't argue. And on one occasion, mother wasn't brooking any bloody arguments about this. On one occasion, she was chatting to a lady consultant in London. It was just some worry about malformed ear or something. Anyway, so after a chat, and the doctor had asked Becca if the baby, little Mabel, had her jabs, and Becca had made it clear that she wasn't having any. She said, that's of course absolutely your decision. Anyway, Becca said there was something in her demeanour that made me ask a question. And the question was, have you noticed in your patients the effects of any COVID vaccines? And she said, the consultant grew conspiratorial and said, yes, and it's awful. She said, yes, and it's awful. And then my daughter asked, have you heard of Dr. Mike Yeadon? And the lady said, yes, of course. And she said, that's my father. So isn't that a brilliant story? There was a doctor who was quite happy. He wasn't going to badger my daughters about her baby's jabs. Not that that's a problem. And the mama bear phenomenon is very real. I had great regard for both my children, and God help anybody that gets between them and their children. But anyway, I wanted just to, before I will shut up at this point, but I did want to get this across because it's so important. So James, you've been in and around the profession of journalism for a long time. You probably know there are certain things that if you do them, you might be at risk of legal action or whatever. So you're probably quite careful. If you were going to criticize somebody, you would want to think, okay, is this actionable? Can I defend this as fair comment? Or what? What is correct for your field. And probably everybody in every profession is aware of things that you really shouldn't do. A doctor or whatever, you must get informed consent and so on. So here's the thing. If you criticize, if I criticize, or a doctor criticizes, say, blood pressure lowering tablets and says that they're not in favor of them, they think that mild hypertension is not harmful and that the overall effects of treating it is worse than leaving it untreated, which is a true statement, by the way. I'm not the biggest fan of Aseem Malhotra, but he's done a very good lecture on the way blood pressure, normal blood pressure, so-called normal blood pressure, is now lower than it was, say, 50 years ago. So when they make the measurements of a person, they go, oh, you've got mildly elevated blood pressure, Dr. Smith, James, better give you these blood pressure lowering tablets. And, well, should I take them? And it's like, well, you have got elevated blood pressure. And we know there is a relationship between elevated pressure and your chance of dying early of some cardiovascular accident. So you think, well, better take the tablets then. But here's the dirty truth that Aseem tells us, that these interventions have been studied over decades now. If you take these blood pressure lowering tablets, it does lower your blood pressure. So you might think, well, that's good, isn't it? No, it isn't, because they've followed these people with pharmaceutically lowered blood pressure out for several decades, and they don't die. They die no earlier. So yeah, they don't die at a later age than people who are not treated. So in other words, you've lowered something that's completely irrelevant to their overall longevity. But what they have got is the side effects of these damn things. If you take blood pressure lowering agents, your blood pressure will be lower. So if you, as a man, if you leap out of bed in the morning, you often get what's called postural hypotension. And that is manifested as dizziness for a few seconds after standing. And loads of people fall over and sometimes injure themselves quite badly as a result of having postural hypotension because of these bloody medicines. But the story is incorrect. You don't need to lower moderately raised blood pressure, and it's not raised anyway. They've just lied about what the baseline value is. And every area of science, of medical science, I've looked into maybe half a dozen, and they're all wrong. Like early screening for various dread diseases. I'm afraid you almost never catch the disease they're telling you that this is all about. So, for example, you're a man of a certain age, James. We're told that we should have our prostate-specific antigen, or PSA.
Yeah.
Don't, James, because I won't waste listeners' time today, but probably from 1,000 screened men of 55, 65, 70, whatever, maybe one person is saved from dying of prostate cancer, but at least 10 of them are going to end up unnecessarily having their prostate removed.
Global warming is a massive con. There is no evidence whatsoever that man-made climate change is a problem, that it's going to kill us, that we need to amend our lifestyle in order to deal with it. It's a non-existent problem. But how do you explain this stuff to your normie friends? Well, I've just brought out the revised edition of my 2012 classic book, Watermelons, which captures the story of how some really nasty people decided to invent the global warming scare in order to fleece you, to take away your freedoms, to take away your land. It's a shocking story. I wrote it, as I say, in 2011 actually. The first edition came out, and it's a snapshot of a particular era, the era when the people behind the climate change scam got caught red-handed, tinkering with the data, torturing till it screamed, in a scandal that I helped christen ClimateGate. So I give you the background to the skullduggery that went on in these seats of learning where these supposed experts were informing us, we've got to act now. I rumbled their scam. I then asked the question, okay, if it is a scam, who's doing this and why? It's a good story. I've kept the original book pretty much as is, but I've written 2 new chapters, one at the beginning and one at the end, explaining how it's even worse than we thought. I think it still stands up. I think it's a good read. Obviously I'm biased, but I'd recommend it. You can buy it from jamesdelingpole.co.uk/shop. You'll probably find it, Mike. Just go to my website and look for it, jamesdelingpole.co.uk. And I hope it helps keep you informed and gives you the material you need to bring round all those people who are still persuaded that, oh, it's a disaster, we must amend our ways and appease the gods, appease Mother Gaia. No, we don't. It's a scam.
You're a man of a certain age, James. We're told that we should have our prostate-specific antigen, or PSA.
Yeah.
Don't, James, because I won't waste listeners' time today, but probably from 1,000 screened men of 55, 65, 70, whatever, maybe one person is saved from dying of prostate cancer, but at least 10 of them are going to end up unnecessarily having their prostate removed for no reason. And then they have lifelong morbidity. It's not fun to have any kind of procedure like this. And they know that's what happens. This isn't my hunch. Urologists know that the net effect, the more people they screen, the more people who have invasive investigations, the more people who have their prostates unnecessarily removed at great cost and fees to the surgeon, the urologist. And their argument for doing it is, oh, we saved Mr. Jones from prostate cancer. Yeah, but they didn't tell you about the other 10 guys who are now incontinent and impotent or have chronic pelvic pain for no good reason as a result of the follow-up investigations. It's not a useful test. This blood test is about as reliable as PCR tests are for COVID. And the same with cancer screening. Don't give people poop in a plastic tub. Every one of these things is a diabolical mischief. Anyway, but I wanted just to say something about what happened. So you can criticize individual pharmaceutical medicines, and it might be Pfizer's second biggest drug, right? You might criticize anti-cholesterol lowering drugs, for example. You might even name the drug and say, I don't think you should take Lipitor or Crestor or any of these drugs. What doesn't happen, a black helicopter does not descend into your back garden at night and you get arrested, right? That doesn't happen. Nothing happens. You don't get a letter from the regulatory body that you report to, like the General Medical Council. No one writes to you. No one calls you. As I say, they don't send the SAS through your window. You criticize vaccines. If you criticize vaccines, and if you do it persistently, even with evidence, and you get the professional equivalent of Black Hawk arriving in your back garden, and you don't have to be a doctor. It will happen if you're a doctor, and quickly too. But if you are a solicitor, it will happen. If you are an architect, it will happen. If you're a lawyer, it will happen. If you report to a professional body and you criticize vaccines persistently, It's almost as if there's an arrangement. Excuse me, George, that guy over there, he's one of yours, isn't it? Well, he's been criticizing our clients' best products. So you will put him right, won't you, in the usual way. And the usual way, James, is you will be told that whatever it is, the builders council, you might be a member of the Guild of Builders or something like that. And you will be told that you are in danger of bringing the profession into disrepute. Seriously, they won't say you're a builder, we don't care what you say about vaccines. They'll say you're in danger of bringing your profession into disrepute. And if you do that, we will have to take action that might prevent you practicing in your fields because you'll be deregistered. So why would they do that, James, when they don't do it for any other category of medicine, including medicines that make a damn sight more money? And of course, you and I and our listeners know why they bloody do it. And it's because the virus lie plus contagion lie equals vaccine lie, and the injection allows them to poison you, and we're going to preserve that. So if you challenge the lies, we're going to have to terminate your professional ability with extreme prejudice. And it only happens with vaccines. Anyway, I could go on forever and I shouldn't.
Mike.
But that's where I've got to with that one.
Thank you for restating this. I must say, I don't like singling out podcasts for praise, but one of the other, apart from the ones I've done with you, one of the other best podcasts I've ever done was talking to Sasha Latypova about precisely this. Now, can you remember the author of the Nobel Prize paper? Was he called Coke, or was it something else?
Oh no, you think you might be thinking of Cox postures. I can't remember.
I think this chap may also have been called Cock. I don't know.
Yeah. I can't.
Anyway,
I do know it, and yeah, he won a Nobel Prize for discovering this principle of injected allergy.
Just people can look it up, and I'll try and find the link to it for the bottom. But essentially, what Sasha pointed out, and I don't think it gets stated enough. She said, "Look, it's all very well saying we shouldn't eat wheat because the varieties of wheat have changed and the way it's grown and it's full of glyphosate and yada, yada, yada. And we shouldn't eat seed oils. We shouldn't do that." She said, yeah, fine. These things may have a deleterious effect on your health. But all this is nothing as compared with the damage that is done by penetrating your defense system with these proteins, as this chap, Nobel Prize winner, said. And what makes it worse is the anaphylactic shock, effectively caused by penetrating within that 2-week after period. It's the double thing, which is why they were so keen to inject us twice during COVID. And what you've established, and I've kind of learned, and I don't think enough people quite appreciate this, is that this is their business model and their kill mechanism. That the entire pharma industry depends on the damage done to its market.
I think it's very important. I agree with Sasha. I think it's the single most important sort of population level injury mechanism. That there are others, but as she said, in many countries, almost every child, it's like some countries, is it 90+%? Something like that. They consider themselves good citizens if they bring their innocent babies for being jabbed.
And the vaccine schedule now is about how many jabs?
72 times. 72 times.
Which is why I was quite surprised to see one of our number supposedly awake.
My computer's running down. I think we didn't turn the sockets off.
That's exactly the sort of behaviour I engage in, Mike.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, James. Yes, you were just saying you were quite surprised.
I'm slightly frightened by the aspects that we have in common. I'm looking at you. I see elements of me, and I'm not sure that's a good thing.
Oh dear, I am so sorry.
Well, I mean, imagine what it's like being our wives. No, I was a bit surprised to see a supposedly awake blogger podcaster putting out this thing about, I think, during meningitis, where he was sort of seeming to suggest that vaccines were okay under certain circumstances.
No.
And I was thinking, how can you be awake and not know this stuff?
Exactly.
It's basics now.
It is very bad. And I'm embarrassed to say that I should have realized this. But it just goes to show that, again, Bunny will often tell me, my wife, it's like, you were not thinking that there were a bunch of criminal nutcases out to harm you. So why would you spot it? It's if you were told as you go about your world, basically it's full of booby traps, and your job is to spot as many booby traps as you can. You'd be looking for the booby traps, right? And so you don't spot them. I didn't spot them. I do now. In fact, again, one of my, it's not an axiom yet or a law. I'm not that clever, but you and I, James, have noticed that quite a lot of things we've been told aren't true, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it occurred to me just recently that almost anything of substantial importance that is told to us by authorities, and everyone is told, so it's like through the television or radio or a cultural medium, so pretty much everyone knows this thing that I'm talking about. I think if you can't verify it because, for example, it's too far away or too small or too complicated, under those circumstances, I think it's almost axiomatic that what you've been told is a lie, which is like shocking, isn't it? And somebody said to me, Mike, you're reasonably clever, but you're not that clever. You worked out a few things are lies. That doesn't mean everything's a lie. And I've said, I'm not saying everything's a lie. I'm saying everything that authority tells us that we're all told and you can't check it is a lie. And I said, if you think that's wrong, give me your best shot of 3 important things that you can't check that we've been told by authority that you sure are true. And they didn't come back. It's like dinosaurs, fossil fuels, evolution, shape of the realm. I mean, I'm not sure what the shape of the realm is, James. This is
You're not one of those dinosaurs.
I've taken the fifth on the shape because it strikes me it's slippery, so slippery. I don't know. But the dinosaur stuff, Darwin's theory of evolution is great for explaining variation. Small variations in a species, I think, I don't know whether that's the mechanism, but it's certainly consistent with the change you see over time, adaptation. But it's completely useless at explaining how new species arise, especially with different body plans. And I remember saying this at university, and they go, yeah, we don't know how that happens. It must just be a lot of time in evolution, eh? And next lecture, it's like, so no one would argue with me. You're allowed to not be sure how it happens, but you're called a heretic if you say, I don't think it's true, but I now don't think it's true, because there's no evidence. There's no mechanism for explaining the arrival of new species with different body plans using Darwin's inch by inch, a small mutation that is an advantage and therefore is retained in the offspring, and then they get to produce more offspring with this small change. That allows you to make small changes. It doesn't allow you to change your body plan. There's no intermediate form, James, is there? That's the other problem in the so-called fossil record. The intermediate forms, you would think most of the animals, since they're evolving all the time, most of the animals would be like intermediate. But they're not.
Yeah, like half developed wing coming out of the mouth. Sort of,
exactly. So I could have like a horn in the middle of my head and 2 pink wings, but a normal no tail. But so you don't find the intermediate forms. They're called missing links, aren't they? It's like they're not just missing links; they're never found, pretty much. But the fossil record should be strewn with these. These are meant to be the survivors, right, James? These are the ones who, having had some random mutation, it was a survival advantage. Otherwise, how would we be here? They ought to be chock-a-block in the fossil record, but they're never there. And then you find other things like certain ancient crabs, the limulus crab, which is like the horseshoe crab. I mean, I've seen them up close. They really do look like alien spacecraft with a long tail. They look like
that is
like
spooky.
Sort of
My daughter showed me a photograph of a horseshoe crab which she'd
Yeah.
taken in Mexico
It's weird.
only like an hour ago.
Amazing.
And I have not thought of horseshoe crabs.
So the thing is, they are found in the fossil record and haven't bloody changed in 100 million years. So they haven't changed. Same with crocodiles. They haven't changed. So anyway,
I agree with you about
was,
evolution.
we've been lied to. That's my point.
What I wanted to ask you was, before we move on to the other stuff.
Yeah.
So I think you have made a very persuasive case for why it is, for example, that terrain theory, although one hates to give it labels because suddenly you're into camps. But I think you've made a very persuasive case, a counter argument, let's say, to all those people who say, well, my auntie Jen came round and she had a nasty cold, and then a few days later I had it, so it's obvious. I think I was going to ask you one very, 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 very brief point. Do you think that there's a kind of, you know how when you're married to somebody, for example, you think that you communicate telepathically?
Yes.
Do you think on occasion one can come out with a bug in sympathy with one's loved ones or whatever?
Yeah, I do think that's possible because I don't know enough about how the body works. I only know what I was taught, and I'm no longer sure much of that is valid because it treats. The irony is, I was describing early on how I was treating my work as a scientist a bit like how I approach like an old motorcycle that didn't work because it's got all sorts of subsystems in it. And of course, our body isn't really like that. And we end up with renal specialists and urologists and cardiologists and neurologists and so on. But we work as an integrated system. And I don't think it's correct to regard us as a series of basically spare parts that have all been stitched together. But we're more integrated than that. And I think we're integrated at an emotional and spiritual, psychological level as well. So if there's no question, if you were feeling stressed, that could imprint itself through all sorts of subliminal or more obvious ways to someone who's close to you and cares about you. And I imagine that could influence their health.
But the real thing I really wanted to ask you was, the more I've been watching your journey. In fact, joining you on your journey.
Absolutely, I would say pretty much.
We've gone on the same path, not just about our understanding of the world, but also our understanding of the spiritual world. We've both become proper Christians, I would say, as a result. But we can talk about that later on. I've also noticed that as you've become more outspoken, let's say, or clearer in your articulation of what you think the deal is with regards to viruses not existing, for example, and vaccines being a total evil with nothing to be said for them at all.
Yes,
I've noticed that you've come under really unpleasant attack from all sorts of angles, not just from the mainstream, the normie world, but also from within the truth-seeking community, as it were. You notice that?
Yes. Well, the thing is, it's not fun. I mean, I don't like the three camps thing particularly. David A. Hughes.
I was attacked by it. Obviously, I don't like it either. I think he thinks
I think it's too limiting, and I'll explain why in a moment. But this idea of camp one are people who believe what they're being told, so they're like sheep to the they're normie sheep, as it were. Camp two are the ones who realise they're being lied to, but they've only maybe cottoned onto one lie and they grip onto all of the others. So they're still on the fleece of the monster that's going to kill them. And David describes camp three as the one that realises that both stories, the official story and the authorized conspiracy theory are both lies, and it's none of the above. The reason I don't like it is why three, James? And on the back of David describing it, I said to Bunny, if three camps, why not four? And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, camp four for example, could consist of people like this. They'll always be latecomers to the scene.
Yeah.
They'll tell you they're in Camp 3, and their primary job is to kick the shit out of other people in Camp 3, David. Now, I'm not saying that to you, but funnily enough, if you were such a person, I'd put a 4 on your back. And I'm hoping I'm wrong. But the problem, James, is that I think Dave, I can't remember who it was. I think it was you actually that said we were describing the opposite to "it's a big club and you ain't in it." That's the killer line by the comedian, wasn't it? It's a big club and you ain't in it. And I think he was describing Camp 3, and he said it's quite small, and I think you piped up and there's hardly anyone in it. Because it's true, there aren't very many people in Camp 3, and I think quite a few of them aren't to be trusted. And as a result, I actually don't speak to very many people. So am I under attack? I tell you what, I am not. I'm not invited anymore. No one wants to hear from me. Except you.
I do think it's a good sign, Mike, that you haven't joined any kind of organizations, any awake organizations, because I think, like me, you're not really a joiner.
I've never been a joiner, actually. I can do a good impression of being a civilized person, but as people who've watched me for a long time will know, I'm probably a little bit unusual in some ways. I'm harmless normally, unless really goaded. But I can't go. I don't like going along with stuff. And I remember even in industry, if I joined a particular subcommittee for whatever it was, quite quickly, like the first meeting, it would be, what's the objective or the mission of this group? But like, what are the rules? There were like rules. And I just thought it's just so tiring. The reason it's tiring is what happens if you've agreed some rules with people to be part of a campaign team or whatever, and then you wake up one morning and realize that, I'm wrong about that. I'm going to have to say I'm wrong about that and row in a different direction. Oh God, there's 20 other people in this group. I'm going to have to explain it to them, or just start speaking, and then you get attacked for you're damaging unity. It's your own going off on one, and you're damaging the unity of the truth community. And this I can't stand. That I'm very happy to ally with people, as it were, alongside, but I'm not going to be bound by a set of preconditions, really. The preconditions of membership are a hostage to fortune, aren't they? Because it could be, for example, people might have said, we'll tell people that there wasn't there wasn't a severe public health emergency, and the COVID jabs were dangerous, right? Lots of people would be happy with that. But when I said, I'm afraid I think it's worse, I think the injections were designed to harm people, it's like, you can't say that. You can't say that. And I said, I can't not say that. I was in drug discovery, good or bad. I was in a field that required me to understand what would be the effect of adding or removing like little components from a medicine to make it change its behavior based on everything we've learned over like 80 years. And here are a bunch of things you must not do. If you do this, bad things happen. We must not do these in this context. And when I apply that skill and learning, it doesn't even matter if it's wrong. It's just that's the normie understanding of how to avoid harms and what will happen if you fail to avoid them. And when I apply that to the design of these damn things, there is no other conclusion you can reach than that they were intentionally harmful. And lots of people would not have it. You can't say that. I'm not going to go on. People would deplatform me. There several occasions I was told when something was cancelled and then it did go ahead, but on a different time. And I said, what happened? And they said, 3 people who will be nameless said, I'm not appearing on that platform if Yeadon's there. So, and the reason I'm not saying they're necessarily bad, is they probably thought I was mad or extreme.
Yeah.
And I understand I'm not mad, and I probably am extreme because you are being subject to extreme evil by people who've thought very hard I'm certain it's more than 100 years, probably 150 years. And other people say you can add a naught to that. Maybe it's 1500 years. But so for decade and decade and decade, powerful people have met repeatedly and decided to bring about humanity's enslavement and almost certainly our killing. And so with that in mind, it ain't that surprising that we come across an example of mine, of what I've come across, and plenty of other nasty things. I mean, there's the joke when you go into a supermarket, you'll walk and there's 20 aisles, and one of them will say healthy options aisle. It's like half an aisle, and then Bunny will say to me, what are the other 19 and a half aisles full of if this is the healthy options? And of course, it's a rhetorical question because it's unhealthy stuff mostly. Hyper-processed food is your body, it can run on it, but it won't run very well. It's like putting diesel in your petrol car. You shouldn't eat it.
I've tried that. It totally doesn't work.
I'm with you. I eat almost nothing but things that you couldn't recognize as either being bashed on the head and cut up, or fished out of the water, or dug out of the ground or pulled off a tree. If it doesn't fit, and I like cheese as well, which is none of the above. But other than that, I just don't eat anything.
But Mike, we can do this for now. We still have a degree of choice.
Yeah.
Knowing what you know, I mean, sometimes I read your posts on Telegram and I get quite depressed, and I think,
yeah, it is bad.
Is right. That, do you share my feeling looking at the world now? I mean, just briefly, we've got comedy psyop of this space flight, which
I know,
which it's an interesting phenomenon to watch, because I don't know about you, if it were real,
yeah,
people would be reacting in a different way to they are reacting. It's as if, but the way they are reacting is on one level they know it's all fiction. They know it's a nonsense, and these people aren't really going up in a big rocket, and they're not really going around the moon, and it's all fake.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to admit that to themselves would so shatter their sense of self and everything,
yes,
that they can't do that. Therefore, they have to go through this weird double thinking process.
No, I'm sure you're right. It's funny you mentioned that. I mean, I'd seen nothing of it. I actually didn't know it was taking place until after the rocket had launched.
Even when you saw the escape pods before the.
Well, yeah, I've seen a video, but James, it's all an AI video. Of course, those brave cosmonauts, all those brave astronauts risking their lives to push back the frontiers, to boldly go where no man has split an infinitive before, and all that sort of stuff. When I was a kid in the 60s, I collected all the PG Tips Race into Space cards.
I checked out the shell coins.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, no, I remember some of those, but I think my parents must have filled up at a different garage, because I never had those, but I know what you mean. But I remember saying to people that I was quite bitter by the age of 50. I wasn't living under a dome on Mars like I had been promised.
You are
so
living
I was very keen on the space
Earth.
flight. And of course, I have to tell you, until 2021, if you ask me, did we go to the moon? I'd go, of course we did. 1969. It was Neil of the Armstrong and Buzz of the Bottle climbed onto the moon and said it was a great leap for mankind, or whatever it was. And I was chatting to an elderly guy I'd met in Florida. He was a very clever man. He'd been an engineer all his life. And he said, Mike, what about all these frauds? And he said, what about the moon? I said, oh, we did go, didn't we? And it's like, no. He said, no, we didn't. You don't really believe that. And I was embarrassed. I said, I haven't actually looked at it. And he said, well, when you do, you'll realize what it is, and it's not what it seems. Anyway, so yeah.
What was his killer point? What was it? Or did he just...
I think the break point was taking a very close look at, obviously, the black and white images from the moon are enough, in that there are clearly many images in which there are two light sources.
Yeah.
And then people say, oh, you don't understand optics, Mike. It bounced off the spacecraft, or anyway. It's like, no, I don't believe it. And then there are plenty of others where, and there's a picture of the astronaut climbing up the ladder into his tinfoil hut or whatever, whatever this thing is, and you can see that the side of the whatever it's called, the lander, that from which the picture is taken, is in shadow, and yet the astronaut in his white suit is brightly illuminated, and it's like, hold on, he should be in shadow too. Forget whether those individual examples, but I remember looking at many photos, and people were pointing out, this is illogical. This requires an additional light source. So I think it was that, and I mean, I don't know what's up there. I don't have a view on it. Is there really a firmament like in what's his name? Somebody's World. There was that film.
What, Discworld?
Which one?
No. I think it's like in Psalm 19.
Okay.
It's the firmament. It's just like
exactly. So yeah, there's a film, isn't there, where the main character. It's the name of the character's world, I think it is. Anyway,
that one.
And he eventually leaves. He leaves his domain.
Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey, was it?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. Is that what it is?
Yeah,
I don't know. So I don't have a strong. I'm not resistant to it. If I do live in something that's like a snow globe, those little, then that's what it is. But it isn't. I've not done enough work to know.
I don't want to, because I've covered sort of why the moon is nonsense. On other podcasts.
Yeah, the moon landing stuff is.
I'm
quite happy is technically wrong.
What I find almost more interesting to look at is how they gatekeep these various psyops. So just as you've encountered by being skeptical of vaccines, you get monstered. The bots pile in, and so do the kind of brainwashed normies.
Yeah, and just very briefly to say, by sheer luck, I'm not a proper doctor. I have a PhD, and when the monsters set up the professions and their regulators, the people in dark cloaks, lawyers, doctors, dentists, architects, all that sort of stuff, they decided, I assume, that PhDs were just far too random and straggle-taggly group. They didn't need a professional body because they're not professionals, right? So I don't belong to an association on whose approval my continuing ability to call myself Dr. Yeadon relies.
Yeah.
But with every other profession, almost every profession, vets are another one, chartered surveyors, seriously. And so you don't just get monstered in social media, you will get professionally and financially monstered if you criticize vaccines. So if you combine censorship, your inability, your one-to-many communications will be interdicted very quickly. And your professional body will come after you. And most people at that point do give up because they don't want to lose their 150 grand a year job, their pension, their car, and so on.
I wouldn't want to lose it either. But
exactly. And so, it's not cowardice. They've rumbled other people's criminal activity. They've said what they can, and they've been told, now look, if you carry on, it'll have bad consequences for you. And so I think 99.9% of the time, people shut up. So it's incredibly effective. So it works within each profession and across all the professions. And if you're, God love them, if you're a dustman or whatever, they don't care. But not many people will pay attention to them. They may be coherent and well-researched, and they'll still be disregarded. And so, the monsters, they got a good grip on this stuff. And so awakening is something you pretty much have to do for yourself. You can't, as we know, you can't wake anybody up unless they're inquisitive and ask you questions.
And I think you've also got to become, I hate the phrase developing a thick skin, because one doesn't really want to
that's true. Yes. Yes, I wasn't thinking of that. Yes, I was very offended and upset at first because, it's quite heavy
I was
duty.
just comparing. So
I'm not worried anymore. They
I'm
can
talking
bugger
about
off.
the moon stuff because it's happening now, and
Yeah.
it's briefly topical, but it's very interesting seeing the behaviour I'm getting, for example, and you must be experiencing this in various ways on social media, for example. So I get lots and lots of responses. People accusing me of being incredibly thick, which is really, really, really obtuse.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
ironic, really, because nothing could be more obtuse than actually believing that we sent men to the moon through the
Yes.
through the um
Yeah. I mean, it's just
through
the
all that
amount of
radioactivity and stuff.
fakery is once you have it pointed out to you or you alert to look for it, it's quite easy. So I was watching a series of clips this morning where, what was it called? The space shuttle, the thing that had solid rocket boosters. Do you remember? It looked like a big glider.
Where they exploded and they all came back to different jobs.
They all exploded, and then need another 7 astronauts was the
They
cruel
were resurrected.
joke. And it turns out they're all alive. Well, at least I think 6 out of the 7 have been traced, and they've either got the same name and profession, and they even look like an older version of the people lost 40 years ago. I think it was 1986, wasn't it?
But if you point this out, Mike, this is why I find it interesting talking to you, because we observe the methods that they use. So you can point out that the Challenger disaster, that, as you say, they all died in this
horribly
conflagration, but then miraculously people with the same names as them and the same faces appeared in sort of public sector jobs, mainly in academia and stuff. It was an amazing coincidence. Actuarially, I think the chances of that being possible would be, I mean, off the scale, even less likely than Big Bang creating the world.
You know, James, I think it'd probably be less than the 1 in 8 billion that they tell us there are people on the world. I've no idea. I don't think that's true either. I have no idea what the number is, but it's bloody well not 8 billion because authority told you and you can't check it.
So exactly. So okay. So you've got the this thing happening.
Yeah.
And yet
Artemis.
when you point this out to people, instead of going like, wow,
really? Yeah.
You're right. There is no way that thing could happen. I've looked at the names. I've compared.
Yeah.
You're right. Let me look at all the other conspiracy theories. They don't do that.
No, they don't.
Instead, they go, this is just you're talking nonsense. How their reaction, they don't want to process information at all because they've been trained not to.
I think they've been trained not to. Yes, you've got the thought-stopping cliche of conspiracy theorists. That's a very good one that they're trained to use. I have observed up close people I used to know. I don't know them anymore because they exhibited this behavior and more or less ran away. But when I was explaining in 2020 that I don't know why, I said we're not being told the truth. And I explained several things that were already wrong to my neighbour. So it's like a single lady living in the next house. And I've been chatting the way I do for 15 minutes or so. And I looked up and she was ashen and her mouth made the movement, but no sound of, I'm frightened. She literally didn't say a word. Her mouth moved. She said, she almost couldn't speak. And I said, I'm so sorry. I'm not going to go on. This is not kind to you. She couldn't cope. And I think what happens is someone described this as the staircase of disbelief.
Yes.
People are, they can lift a foot up and they are aware that if they put their foot on that first tread, they're done for. Because everything their world comes to pieces the moment they accept the first step. That's how psychologists discussed it. And they said, almost like animals with an instinct for danger. When you raise it, James, about that this rocket is peculiar. Here's 3 things that they are saying has happened, or you can see that they claim has happened, that cannot be because, and you explain it. What's working in their head is, am I going to put my foot on that first tread? Because if I do, I'm lost. The world is lost to me. And it is. In fact, it was John Waters, the Irish guy. I was listening to a podcast he recorded with, what's his name? Tommy Sheridan. And the conversation went something like this. It's been a hell of a shock to realize that the world I knew, he said, is no more. And I think Tommy said, and it never was.
A lot of you have very kindly been asking, what's the best way we can support you? So thank you for caring and thank you for wanting to support me. There is now a new, better way of supporting me. Some of you subscribe via Substack, some of you are on Patreon, some of you are even on Subscribestar, and those all work in their way. The problem is, I find, take Substack as an example. Substack has been a great community for like-minded folk, but it is heavily controlled by the enemy. They deboost people like me. They want normie voices. They don't want really alternative people being given any prominence. Plus, of course, they get a cut of your generous donations. So here's an idea. If you want to, you can now subscribe direct on my website at jamesdelingpod.co.uk. The website's been running for quite a while, but thanks to my assistant Andrew, it's now got new features where you can subscribe directly to me. You get access to all my old archive material. You get my podcasts as they come out, and you can comment on the podcasts, and you can communicate with me probably more directly than you can elsewhere. I think it's probably the best way forward. Also, it obviates the risk of my being suddenly randomly closed down by some of these other websites. They're not our friends. So if you want to support me direct, go to jamesdelingpod.co.uk and sign up there. Thank you, my sharklings. I love you all, but I'm not supposed to have favourites, but I do kind of extra love those of you who make the effort to support me, because without your support, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. So thank you.
I'm lost. The world is lost to me. And it is. In fact, it was John Waters, the Irish guy. I was listening to a podcast he recorded with, what's his name? Tommy Sheridan. And the conversation went something like this. It's been a hell of a shock to realize that the world I knew, he said, is no more. And I think Tommy said, and it never was. And that's the worst part. Isn't it?
But that's almost... I was going to move on to this.
I find that really painful. I'm sure it's true, but it's not just that the world has changed utterly. I was born in 1960, and all of this that is coming to pass in recent years was already up and running before I joined you. That's quite hard.
That is true. But do you not think? Like that poor woman that you described. I am feeling a bit frightened now, because I'm looking at what's going on in Iran,
allegedly.
Looking at it's clearly, well, seemingly clearly to me anyway, that this is some kind of end game of the reset. That it's not obviously it's not about ridding Iran of a terrorist regime. I'm of the view that it's probably prearranged between the powers that be in Iran and the powers that be and the Israeli. It's all fake to a degree. I'm not saying there aren't real casualties.
Yeah, but I'm with you, James. I think
it's a stunt.
I'm not at all convinced there really is a multipolar world. I think at some level there is a power group, and it's helpful to them to allow us to think there are separate power groups, but I don't think there are in practice. So not as regards to their business, and this is their business.
The two things that terrify me most about this, more than anything we've experienced so far, is one. I don't think I've ever before seen such utter disregard for public opinion. It's as if they've
An
completely
example,
cut.
James? An example. Just let me know what you're thinking.
Well, Trump's behaviour now
Right.
is the behaviour of a man who's completely cut loose from polling or what the media say or anything. It's like they really do not give a shit what you think now. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they didn't give a shit during COVID.
The reason I asked for an example is I consume no mainstream media, and I don't even watch any alt media because I'm not confident about anybody. And anybody who puts news out, as it were, in a regular fashion, why would I believe them? I mean, how would they know? I don't know. So why would I think they know? So I'm in a void where I know that I don't know, but I'm not sure there's any source that can tell me. So there's a geopolitical game. It doesn't really matter to me or to people around me whether it really is two power blocks or one power block acting like there are two power blocks. Yes, I think people are being killed. But, for example, have they blown up Qatar's gas processing facility or not?
Good point.
I neither know nor care. It's what they tell us has happened that's going to affect whether or not gas arrives. So even if it hasn't been, it ain't arriving. If their script is, you're not having it. That is my fear.
Mike, this is exactly my fear. My fear as well. It doesn't matter whether or not the Straits of Hormuz is wide open to all comers. They're zooming through with all their cargoes. Doesn't matter if the Iranians are goodies or baddies. It doesn't matter if any Marines have been put on the ground. None of this matters. All that matters is that the powers that be, have created this state of affairs within people's thinking that they now imagine, well, there's going to be oil shortages and there's going to be food shortages, because I've read this article in the newspapers and it says how much traffic comes through that. And so, hey presto, all the powers that be suddenly have an opportunity to starve us of fuel, to keep us from traveling, to keep us locked at home, to deprive us of fertilizer, and starve us to death. And everyone's going to be going,
they could. I don't think they will do that.
Well, what can we do? I mean, it's because of this war
Yeah, I mean, if they wanted to do that, they could do that. I mean, some people have said, "Oh, if we don't get gas or whatever it is, then at night times when the wind isn't blowing, there'll be no essentially no electricity. Far way below that required to even keep a core of the grid up." And here's my prediction: I'm bloody confident they're not going to shut the grid off, because you'll end up with whatever the number is, 70 million pissed off people running around in the dark. Now, most of us would be very frightened and some of us would perish quite quickly. But I tell you what, there are plenty of other people who will be flaming cross about it and will start looking for houses to loot, politicians to string up. They'll be, thinking, well, Mussolini's lot, that his enemies had the right idea, right? So, honestly, if they allowed the country to run out and genuinely it was grid down, there'll be 70 million people, of whom some will be, male angry between 20 and 40 and quite capable of organised violence, and they'll come looking for them.
So, Mike, do you think...
I don't think they could do it, but I don't think they want to do that.
I hate to sound... to call you out as a complete Pollyanna here. Because generally,
it wouldn't be good.
That's not an accusation that's normally laid at you. But let me present an alternative scenario. Okay.
But the reason I say that is, I don't know whether I'm just I don't know. I don't feel frightened. I'm pissed off with what they're doing. Right. I'm not yet frightened. Maybe do I lack imagination? I think they're going to squeeze us psychologically through the medium of forced restriction. You will go into the supermarket and it'll be empty. When that happens, folks, don't panic. There really are shortages. I don't think they're going to starve everybody to death and turn the electricity off, because you know what? I'm going to go hunting if they do that. Might as well. And I'm a mild-mannered, middle-class scientist. If I feel this angry, there are plenty of other people who are going to be a lot less sympathetic. So that's the reason I don't think they'll do it, James. Not because they give a shit, but because I think what they love most of all, probably even more than hurting you, they like control. They like control. They like to know what's going to happen. I think they can't bear uncertainty.
Can I paint a more depressing figure?
Go on, then.
Well, okay. So what if, because look, we've established right at the beginning of this podcast that what they like to do is kill us. And
I think so.
And they have to devise these ingenious ways of making these kill methods look like they're for our benefit. I mean, like, even just very briefly, I commend to you a book by Shannon Rowan. I had her on the podcast once. She's a she's American anyway. She wrote a book called Shots Fired, and it's a very detailed book about all the things we're talking about vaccines and medicine. And there's a bit where she talks about these things called, you know about this, adjuvants. Is it
yes.
Adjuvant?
Adjuvant,
oh, well, all vaccines need these adjuvants. And you think, well, adjuvant, it must be a good thing, right? An adjuvant. And then you read the small print and you discover that adjuvant is this horrible toxic shit they put in to get a reaction to show that So anyway, sorry, I don't want to...
No, you're right. I was always taught it was there to sort of rev up your immune system, so it's like ready to fight. But, what it does is it causes inflammatory crises in you. No wonder you feel unwell.
Exactly. So I don't. Yeah. So they've got all these fancy terms that make the brainwashed go, well, that makes sense to me now, because there's a fancy word that I don't quite understand, but the word, the very fact I don't understand it must mean that it's a good thing and that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So they're out to kill us. Maybe this is the last stage. They've already built their. I mean, every oligarch, or every Illuminati person and sub person, they've got their what do they call those rooms where they fight when it all kicks off? There's
a bunker.
They've got their bunkers, or they've got their safe. There's another word
Epstein
for them.
Island, their refuge.
Yeah, they're ready for all this. They've got all their sort of tin foie gras ready for, and they've got their their henchmen who are going to fight off with guns anyone who tries to, and they've imported their kind of force of killers who are now running Turkish barber shops all over the country, and they've been housed in. So they're ready for when it all kicks off, when it all goes down.
No, you're right.
And
James,
then then what I'm saying is, maybe they're not even pretending anymore. Maybe this is it. They've just given up pretending they're not trying to kill us, and this is the final thing. And you look at the Deagle depopulation plans. Please counter that argument that. And they don't care about us marching on pitchforks and killing all the politicians, because politicians were their servants anyway.
No, absolutely. So if this was the crossing the Rubicon, burning all the boats, mixing my metaphors, for example, on the islands of Britain, if for example, rewilding was the future use of this island, which is entirely possible, so that the king could go hunting stag again. Wouldn't it be perfect? It's basically
wolves and seagulls and
yes,
beavers.
They could turn everything off, and their modelers have worked out. They've worked out what the time course of the expected fall in population is. And they'll say by 2028 there'll be small marauding bands of people going around, eating the corpses of the remaining people. It will be safe to go by 2031. They could do that. Counter it was the argument. What I would say is, they're clever, but they're not gods. They have got modeled expectations of what will happen in response to scenario A, B, and C, but it's not certainty, James. And you remember the old saw from the Prussian war generals or Napoleon, that battle plans scarce survive first contact with the enemy. The future is almost never what you think it's going to be. They might be able to predict tomorrow with high fidelity, and next week they'll be pretty damn right. But, within a month, 3 months, how do they know, for example, that we might not be luckily resourceful and take over the Foley refinery? And it turns out that 10 of us used to work there and we get the bloody thing working again. Are they sure? How sure? And so I would say each, I could think of lots of little discrete outcomes that might be annoying for them. And the probability of any one of those happening is low. But if you look at the probability of one of them over all of them occurring, eventually it starts to become disturbingly high. And I think that represents a likely out of control situation. Now, they could probably, send some army people in, or as you said, the Turkish barber, our nice guests, and finish us off. But I would say it's an uncertainty that they don't need to assume. It's a risk they don't need to take. So they could do it, but if I was the evil, I think if somebody told me, it's like the reason why we should use cash, for example, is imagine the Bank of International Settlements, and they turn up at the meeting, to the real bosses, because it's not them. They're staff, aren't they? The people who work at the Bank of International Settlements.
And Satan is the CEO.
Yeah, so they're giving a presentation about CBDCs, and they have that big fat bloke, Augustin Carstens. I hope he dies soon. It'd be really good if he did. He's the one that said, we do not know who is using 100 peso bill today, $100 bill today, but we will have technology that allows us to know about the use of every expression of central bank liability and the technology to enforce it, right? That's cashless.
They chose him to annoy you, Mike.
Go on then.
He did. They chose this enormous fat bloke to lecture you on how to do life, knowing that you react in this way.
Absolutely. It's almost like whatever it is. There's the fat bloke in some film a long time ago
Mr. Creosote.
Mr. Creosote, and he was offered just a little after dinner minutes and then exploded. Oh, waffle, all this sort of stuff. So, you imagine this though. They just give their presentations to the overlords. They could just be. They might look like normal humans, these people in charge, James. It's possible that they have horns, but I don't know. They could look like humans and not be humans. I don't know who they are. They could just have lots of money. The reason I went down that little flight of fancy is what has happened, it seems to me, over the last few years is so unbelievably well coordinated that it feels like they've been using either a good AI, which may have existed a long time before we learned anything about it, or something supernatural. Because how the hell have they coordinated everything so well? And as far as I can tell, almost no faults. And I think sometimes where there has been a fault, it almost looks like they did that on purpose to see whether to then research how many people detected it. So anyway, it doesn't matter. Does it make any difference whether they're computers, demons, or clever people?
On just briefly on that note, somebody tweeted out today that maybe NASA is going to make a miscalculation and make their project seem so absurd that everyone will wake up and realize. And I said, no, that's not the model. The model is deliberately to make their projects look embarrassingly shit, because mockery is part of the.
They mock their own
ritual.
Work sometimes, don't they? The mass shooting in Australia, is that not one where apparently it was so obviously not as described that you only needed to be paying attention to see that it couldn't possibly, I don't know, wasn't the hero du jour somebody who had been involved in a terrorist incident somewhere else.
Oh
It's
yes,
like,
the guy who, as luck would have it, he'd been in Israel, he'd been in the
yeah,
October 7th, and then he'd flown to Australia for a better
for a
life,
break
and found himself in this
in the middle of a
in the middle.
Islamic terrorist incident. It's just astonishing.
But to us, Mike, it's so obvious, and to the, I mean, in a way, we are, to use a
We're
Masonic
cheap.
phrase, we are the sacred, and the normies are the profane, and this is,
Yeah,
they love mocking people and
yeah,
making it so obvious because part of the way that Satan works, and we agree that Satan is the CEO, is
yes,
he can only do this stuff with your consent, which is why you have
yes,
to give the vampire permission to cross your threshold. That's a kind of literary analog to what actually happens. They need to do they show you what they're going to do, and they make it absurd. And if you still believe it, you're effectively, by their
yeah,
rule book, you are
yeah,
giving consent.
yeah. You didn't say anything. You didn't object at all. Yeah, no, I must say, although I think they eschew lack of control, I think they love making us suffer. But I really
Yes,
think
they
that
do.
what they like even more is control, because it's like, now, if I have control, I can torture and kill that person anytime I want, and it gives me a frisson of excitement. Oh, and now I'm going to do it. Whereas if they just said, throw the switch and let us know how they get on, they could do that, but I just think they like control. The counter argument, James, to your argument would be, why do that when they can have a glorious time torturing us under complete control? So my prediction is that, as you said earlier, we're going to be told, oh, Core Lummy, because of this very unfortunate war, and petrochemicals and fertilizers have all been damaged, we're all going to have to pull our belt in, and that means, I'm afraid, no driving unless you're an essential worker. Oh,
Yeah.
and by the way, you won't be able to get petrol without using a digital ID. We need to know who's got the fuel, you see. We can't have a black market developing. So what perfect way to install digital ID this would be? So I think it'll be genuine shortages, which are they're genuinely short, but they don't need to be. I don't think.
Yes.
I don't think they blow. Why would they blow their own bloody infrastructure up either? They don't tend to do that these days. I don't think.
Let's accept that your case is the correct one, and I do find it seductive. How it's all very well said. Look, with the vaccine, we could say, I'm not going to take this. I'm not going to have it in my arm.
Yeah.
But you can't say, right, well, I'm going to go and steal the petrol from the petrol station, or I'm going to drive anyway. I mean, you haven't got us over a barrel at this point.
Yeah, no, they do. But a statistic, just I don't know whether this is true, but I was reading an account about wartime rationing in Britain, because I thought I better go and find out at least what was said. And by 1945 in Britain, guess what fraction of food was delivered to the table by the black market? And it was about a third. About a third. Now, people might say, yeah, well, but that was because there was a lot more local growing. And I am sure that's true. Somebody, when they were slaughtering a cow or whatever, if you put a word in the right ear, and you could trade something, maybe gold or whatever, for someone else's meat. But nevertheless, I thought, bloody hell, a whole third? What that suggests is that the easygoing, law-abiding English person that we are told, that is what occupied this country just 70 years ago or 80 years ago, a third of them were engaged in something that was effectively criminal. They were buying petrol, and there would be the seedy guy would have cigarettes inside his raincoat. And people would basically. So what I'm saying is, I think, to the extent some fuel, some food is going to be available, that is, they're not going to actually starve us. That means there will be some food, there will be some fuel, and I think some of it will escape the clutches of the dark controllers. and will be available on the black market. Now, I've no idea whether it'll be a tenth of what we need. 1%, could be a third. But you might think, oh no, everything's got a barcode on it these days. It's like, well, has it? Has it really? Let me just mention, I mentioned, I think on the previous podcast, that when Bunny and I were going to America, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the guy at the check-in was a Spaniard and who had been working at Heathrow for some years, and he grabbed my hand, he recognized me, he wouldn't let go. And he said, do you know, he said, when people couldn't fly without a vaccine passport or a negative test, he said, I need to tell you something. He said, they weren't real. I said, what do you mean? He said, people would turn up with like handmade QR codes. They'd used Microsoft Paint and then like taken an image and then dumped it into a genuine certificate. I could tell it wasn't real because I've got a good eye, but he said if they looked like they'd made a fair attempt, so that if another security guard looked at it, they wouldn't know it was fake, because otherwise I'd be in the shit.
Yeah.
He said if it looked like a good attempt, I let them through. And I said, what do you mean I let them through? Didn't you have to beep them? And he said, yeah, that you beeped them, and a green light came on. I said, what, it didn't go up to a database in the sky? He said, there wasn't a database. There wasn't a VaxPass database. There wasn't a negative test database. Now, might there be such a thing? Of course there might be. That sounds quite easy. But the fact is, James, they didn't bloody do it. They just relied on you thinking it was in existence. I'll give you 2 other examples.
Yeah.
When you travel on a train in this country, you get a little sort of orange ticket, and on the back it's got like a 1 centimetre wide magnetic strip. I'm told that's what it is anyway. And when Bunny and I got to London, I would say every other trip, one of our blessed tickets stops working. You poke the little paste ticket in and it flips out and it doesn't lift the barrier, and you have to go to the man or the lady and say, excuse me, my ticket's not working. And then without looking at you, they just get their pass and they open the turnstile in the tube, right?
Yeah.
Here's my point, James. That's about as bloody simple as it gets. They've been having magnetic strip train tickets, 40 years? They still don't bloody work. So my last example, armed with this information from the Spanish guy, I said to Joanna, we were coming back from Cyprus recently and previously Tenerife. And I said, let's play a game when we get to the smart entry things at Heathrow. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you put your passport in, I have a hypothesis that that's all that's being read. And so we agreed to try it. Sorry, no, I made a mistake. We came back from one trip and we both did what we're supposed to do. We put our passports in the reader and we stood there, and the little camera goes until it finds you, and then it flashes. 5 seconds passes and the gate opens. So we both did that, but I noticed and Joanna noticed that her machine didn't flash. And it went quite a dark hall, so something was wrong with the machine. But we went in, it read the passport, it hunted for our face, mine flashed, hers didn't, both turnstiles opened. And as we walked out, she said to me, I don't think mine flashed. I said, did yours flash? So we both noticed. Anyway, I said, my theory is they're not using biometric facial recognition at all. And if we enter with each other's passports, next time it'll open. So we came in and with each other's passports, we'd swapped our ticket stubs. So we'd have plausible deniability. Oh, it's got my name on. Oh God, I've put it in my wife's passport. So anyway, she made a bit of a nose up of presenting the passport, and it failed to take a reading. And eventually someone came over and we were rumbled. But what we did when we both went in together, so Joanna put hers in, I put mine in, Joanna very decidedly looked down hard at her feet so that the top crown of her head was facing the camera. And I went like this, right? So my eyes were screwed closed, my face was contorted, and my tongue was stuck out. Barriers just let both of us in. Took a picture of the crown of my wife's head, and it took a gargoyle-like picture with me with my eyes closed. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not possible, is it, that they are using biometric facial recognition? Could they do so? I don't know. Maybe. But you know what? They don't need it to work. They just need you to think it's working. The reason I tell this story is I want you to not believe when they tell you in the face of rationing and digital ID and whatever, and entering and leaving supermarkets, it'll be a farce. It won't be real. So we need to test the thing by let's pretend it ain't working, James. Just do it anyway. So if they ration us, but you can still buy food with money, fuck the rations. Go and buy it, and you'll be told you won't be able to because your digital ID won't work. Well, I think it'll be a Potemkin setup, because it's cheap, and they're cheapskates as well, and they're haters. So why put together a sophisticated system where one that would fool children is fooling most of us? But anyway, that I don't think that will last forever. But I think at the moment it doesn't work.
Very cheery message on which to end the podcast. I just want to say, I love you, Mike. I think you're fantastic.
I love you, and Bunny loves you too. I mean, I would say you have the most interesting guests of anyone. In fact, that's suspicious. We've thought, how is he so well connected? Are the CIA providing all of your guests, James? It's
just my Dark Lord. My Dark Lord.
Exactly. But no, we do joke. I mean, you can't really be certain of anybody. I've said to my wife, we were walking, and I said, it's so difficult. You can't really trust anyone. I said, you can't even trust me. And she said, I've known you for 43 years. You're not capable of any of that. And she is right. I'm not. She said, you're not capable of any subterfuge. You would be rumbled immediately. So I'll be wrong about a lot of stuff, but I'm not lying. That's the one thing you can be sure of. So just back to the cash, just a little story of Augustine Carson's The Fat Man. Do you think they picked a very fat man just because it would piss us off? Maybe they did. So imagine that they've all given a report to the principal about how CBDCs are going and the rationing and so on. And then they asked the cash lady or the cash guy, so we're going to shut cash off. I want you to tell me precisely what are the predictable impacts on various bits of the economy. And they go, we've no idea. What do you mean you've no idea? The amount of cash that's being used is 3 times what it used to be. There's no way to know what sectors are, because remember, a £20 note can go through and through and through. A single £20 note could furnish 10 transactions in the same day, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're my hairdresser, I give you my £20 note. He might go to the a stall at the market and buy a pasty. Then that person might, bet on a horse, buy some petrol. So cash is lethal. The reason they don't like cash is, one, they can't interfere. It's an unmediated transaction between you and the person providing the goods and services. So not only can they not interfere, but they don't even know what is happening. And then thirdly and worse, and this is much more powerful. Cash is so much more powerful because it's not only anonymous and not interferable with and not recordable, but it's genuinely contagious, James. If you drop a £20 note into the economy, it will keep going round until someone pays it into a business, pays it into the bank, and then it can be either destroyed or put out through a ATM, a cash point. But so I keep saying to people, the cash stuff is more important than you know. It's not even about your anonymity. It's about throwing a spanner in the works of them knowing precisely what will happen if they do things. And the more cash that there is in use, this is true, the less predictable the effect of removing it. And I don't think they like that. They don't like it.
Get more cash.
Get more cash. They don't like. Why do I think they don't like control? Is that just a convenience? They work so hard for it, James. Here's the example. The example of look how hard they've worked in order to prevent professionals rumbling that something's wrong with vaccines and speaking about it. They've put in place like a standard operating procedure, regardless of the profession, so they can expedite you being warned and silenced. If they didn't really care, they would just let it. It probably wouldn't go anywhere, but I've seen several people who are not medics be threatened by professional bodies. So it's not the best example, maybe, because I do think it's not the only one. I do think it's a very important weapon for them. because the combination of being able to frighten you, to restrict you, and then roll up your sleeve to be poisons, that's ultimately what it is, if they want. It's an incredibly powerful weapon which they don't want threatened. But my general thought, James, is that they've worked very hard to keep us mostly normies in our places. Think of the money they spend on TV, the news, films. I don't watch. I never was a film watcher, but I've watched other people dismantling, say, God, what's his name? The most famous Kubrick. People, Stanley Kubrick's movies. I have no idea how much symbolic effort. You probably know much more about this. You're a culture person. So in novels, TV, series and movies, and so there's so much, they've put in so much effort to control us. You might say, well, that's necessary. Is it necessary? Or do they want like a 99.9999% confidence? That I just think they put so much effort in. They might do it. I'd be genuinely surprised. I think we're still too close to normality to pull the big yellow handle. You could be right, James. What are we, 6 years, 6.25 years? I still think we're too close to normality for people to go full on, I don't know. I think I may be wrong. And the truth is, in this conversation, one thing I think is fairly unlikely, and that's everything goes back to normal. It could, but I think it's unlikely. So I think it's going to be somewhere between. Yeah, this is why. If they have rationing, James, they will almost certainly succeed in making the normies adopt digital ID.
Yes.
If they get the rationing right and the incentives, almost everybody will sign up for digital ID. We might find it's either black market or feed yourself or starve those, or go and burgle other people. So I imagine the incentive to adhere to what they want you to do will be very strong. And it may be, they might think, let's just do 3 months of that, and then we'll take a view. Don't you think that's quite attractive if you were one of the dark controllers, the idea that you might get almost everybody sign up? Once they've got everybody signed up to digital ID, the removal of cash is a choice they can make. Even if we riot, they could just stop releasing it, and they could come up with all sorts of ostensible reasons, like the Dillaroo printing plant was bombed by an Iranian terrorist. Because apparently most of the banknotes in the world are made, I think, by one company called Dillaroo.
Yeah.
So I think they would really be very, very happy if they could get us to sign up to digital ID. Because then they have total control. They can remove cash, introduce central bank digital currencies, and then it doesn't matter what you think. Their argument will be, you'll have what we give you if you're a good boy. And that's total control. So let's see.
You're right, Mike.
But it's not happy. It's not happy. It's not happy circumstance. But
it's not going to be. We're never going to end with.
No, it's never going to be. It's never going to be easy. But it's nice, lovely speaking to you, and it was great meeting you as well. When you bump into a person who's I don't know if the right phrase is awake, but people who've realised that we're just being lied to, you've got so much in common with that person straight away. You all realise that your politics doesn't matter. All of that. It doesn't matter if you make money or you make
anyway.
money.
We're over all
the only
that.
thing that matters is, are you going to resist these people? And the answer is yes. It's not over, right? Again, actually, just a little note of optimism. Did you interview a guy called Escape Key? Escape
Key. He's good.
He's either an incredible psyop or he's the most remarkable researcher I've come across, bar none. A fantastic guy. I think he was a systems analyst for a corporation, and he said that gave me the kind of mental skills how to attack things. When people have said, your description of what they're trying to do is so depressing, And he said, nonsense. He said, and he cited 4 or 5 examples of things they've tried to do that didn't work. I can't remember them, but one was the League of Nations, James. The League of Nations was a resounding failure and had to be abandoned and replaced by the United Nations.
Which is also
and apparently, he said they've tried a banking system like the one they're trying to install right now. They tried to do that in 1880. So he said there's literally half a dozen major turning points where basically he thinks they thought they had us and they didn't. So he said, this looks quite scary, but he said they haven't actually done it yet. And I know people in IT, old people, those who know Bill Gates and thought he was a fairly unpleasant young man before he became very wealthy. And they've said, what you have described to me, Mike, what you think they're going to do, he said, I don't actually think it's possible. And I've worked for 55 years in IT. So I have met several people who claim to know whether or not this can be done and think it couldn't. And what do I mean by this? A biometric digital ID has to be up to date in the moment. Otherwise, I might buy a sausage in Safeway and then walk to the other end of the city and buy some steak in Waitrose, right? It's got to be updated in real time with very little latency. And yet, when I present the goods for purchase and my digital ID, which might be connected to my payment method, it's got to decide in the moment whether to let me have that item. Not my basket, that item, yes, no. And so it must be low latency, extraordinary high accuracy. And it can't make mistakes. A mistake in 1,000 maybe, or 10,000. But basically, and so he said that I don't think I don't think they've got systems that will process all the transactions on Earth at the pace they're happening. And remember, you need who you are, where you are, what you're trying to buy, what else you've bought recently, and then other modifiers like your social credit score. Have you said mean things about the government on Twitter? And all of that will come down to whether you can buy this food item or not. And it's got to be yes or no. In the end, the transaction clears or it doesn't clear. And I know IT people who've said, that's wonderful what you're describing, Mike. And I can draw the diagram on paper. We can't do it. My younger daughter works for an international apparel, women's fashion. And last year they'd merged with another company and they'd combined their IT systems for ordering, logistics, distribution, and so on. And they spent hundreds of thousands of pounds. You know where I'm going with this. And then they did trials. They ran in parallel for a couple of months, and they did the weekend cutover. And my daughter said, and on Monday morning, nothing worked. It's like nothing worked. They had all the consultants in. They had to restart the old systems, patch it up. And he said, it's still not right now, 3 months later. And that was like 2 bloody identical companies moving women's clothing around. And they couldn't do it. It's like,
yeah.
So I don't know anything about computers. But
we've all experienced.
Remembering what I've been
IT
told, I
issues.
think they might not be able to do it.
Okay, we're definitely going to end there, Mike.
All right.
Tell me, tell us, you've got is your Telegram channel the best place to find?
I've got a Telegram channel and I'm copied about 6 times by other people. So you have to look for Dr. Mike Yeadon Solo. And I'm on Dr. Mike Yeadon on Substack.
Right.
And
and you do say some really interesting things, not just about
but it's an echo. At this point, I think it's an echo chamber. I don't think I reach any new people, James.
Oh well.
But that's okay. Lots of people have worked things out for themselves. And don't let your head go down.
I don't buy into echo. I think the very phrase echo chamber in this context was put about by the enemy to make us feel bad.
You are right.
You
are right. But
saying things to like-minded folk, receptive folk.
I know you're not. You're an outdoors man, and you're a man of faith, and you're positive. So, but I would say to you and to myself and all the listeners, what they want is for you to be demoralized. I think that's a very important outcome. Demoralization. So resolve not to.
Cheered me up. You've cheered us all up,
resolve
Mike.
not to be demoralised.
I'm going to have a cheery cigarette now.
Absolutely.
Lots
Enjoy
of love,
your,
Mike.
enjoy
Love
your
to chat.
ciggy and go and pat a horse or whatever.
I will do. I'm doing that tomorrow. Excellent.
When your finger is better.
Oh yeah, I'm having the thing out on I'm giving you the middle finger
Sounds
here.
so gruesome.
I'm having it out on Wednesday.
Oh,
2
I
days.
did enjoy your conversation with Dick about that. That was actually side-splittingly funny. It's like, would you like some midazolam? Does he need a ventilator? That was very funny.
Right, I'm going.
James, it's been lovely.
I'm going. You've got. Hang on, wait a second. You've got